Carlos Alcaraz fans, we might not be seeing our king on the clay anymore this year. And with this pick circling social media, there is a lot of doubt that he is going to be playing Roland Garros. Already pulled out of Barcelona and Madrid with what we thought was a minor wrist injury. But from the minimal information that Carlos has been giving us, it does seem like this is far more serious than everyone had anticipated. Still undergoing tests, and he's still going to be determining his timeline over the next couple of weeks. Already pulled out of Madrid. Like I said, he's unlikely to play Rome, and he is uncertain on Roland Garros.
The most chilling detail isn't the injury itself. It's the person who finally spoke up. When Boris Becker began drawing connections around Carlos Alcaraz, the narrative instantly became far less triumphant and far more uncertain. Because what the public is witnessing might just be one side of the story. Are we seeing a legend in the making, or gradual destruction unfolding before our eyes? What truths remain carefully unspoken? And at what point does the edge become impossible to step back from?
A fascinating player. I mean, that's exactly what the tennis world needed. Very charismatic, a joy to watch. You know, he's a real artist on the tennis court. And I don't see a weakness. But with all artists, you know, they have to be inspired, and I think he's inspired by Sinner and by some of the other challenges. But if matches go too easy for him, if anything, he probably gets it a bit.
Something doesn't add up, and the numbers aren't giving it away. The titles keep accumulating, the standings still dazzle, and the match clips keep spreading as though everything remains perfectly fine. Yet beneath all of that, a completely different reality is slowly taking shape around Carlos Alcaraz.
Carlos Alcaraz saying the test came back and he will not be playing either Rome or Roland Garros. John, I'll start with you. What was your reaction to that?
It's just a bummer. I mean, I don't think this was a big shock. I mean, I was in Barcelona last week. He pulled out, and there was a sense that he probably wouldn't post for Madrid. In Madrid, there was a sense he probably wouldn't post for Rome. Now we get Roland Garros. So this is not, I mean, he showed up at that Laureus Awards with a cast, but it's just so unfortunate. The guy won the previous major. He was two-time defending champion here in Paris, where I am. It's just, you know, you hope this is playing the long game here.
What makes this truly disturbing is not simply the injuries or the exhaustion that everyone keeps murmuring about, but the moment when one of tennis's most credible figures, Boris Becker, chose to voice what others deliberately leave unspoken, and in doing so, walked straight into ground that most players are careful never to touch.
I've been seeing some really bad takes to the Carlos Alcaraz injury recently, the wrist injury that is keeping him out of Rome and then Roland Garros, where he's of course the defending champion. Some of these takes are saying things like this is going to be the end of his career, will he ever be able to come back again? And I've just got to say, what are people talking about? This is a 7-time Grand Slam champion by the age of 22. This is a man who is a physical phenom. Of course, he is going to be back. And there is so much historical context for this as well.
Tennis has long functioned like a gentleman's circle, where opinions stay tightly guarded and personal affairs are never aired publicly. Which is precisely why Becker's remarks did not simply turn heads. They sent a quiet wave of unease throughout the entire sport. When someone carrying his level of authority suggests that something more serious is brewing beneath the surface, the world pays attention, even those who act as though they are not.
Tennis needs Carlos. Being young, going through difficult moment, it can happen. I do believe he's gonna come back stronger than before, and. But injury is always tough, you know, especially wrist. There are certain areas of our body that are very sensitive, and, you know, the wrist we saw with those other players in the past that they can complicate, you know, our life. So I hope he's gonna come back. And
what makes this entire situation so compelling is that, from the outside, Alcaraz seems to be living the fantasy that every young competitor dreams about. At just 22 years old, he has already assembled a record that most athletes spend whole careers pursuing, gathering Grand Slam titles and cementing himself as the defining face of his generation. Yet success at that magnitude does not simply elevate a player, it reshapes them into something far more layered. At that stage, an athlete is no longer purely competing, but functioning as a worldwide brand, a living corporation with endorsements, commitments, and pressures reaching well beyond the baseline. This is precisely where the narrative begins moving from admiration to worry, because the weight attached to that degree of fame rarely arrives without a cost. Becker's concern was never packaged as criticism, even though plenty chose to read it that way. It landed more like a warning from someone who had witnessed this pattern before and already understood where it leads. He pointed toward a schedule that resembles less a thoughtfully constructed athletic plan and more an unrelenting worldwide circuit, where rest becomes negotiable and recovery shifts from a priority into an afterthought. For a sport as physically brutal as tennis, where the season stretches endlessly across different continents and surfaces, that kind of pressure is not merely difficult to carry, it is genuinely alarming.
Fortunately, Carlos Alcaraz has officially withdrawn from both Rome and Roland Garros due to that right wrist injury. So, unfortunately, the two-time defending champion at Roland Garros is out.
Yeah, your heart sets in a little bit, when you hear that. And I couldn't empathize more having, gone through 2 years of wrist injury over wrist injury and just dealing with that. I could only imagine what the guys...
When you observe Alcaraz closely today, certain subtle details begin emerging if you pay careful enough attention. The explosive athleticism that once seemed almost instinctive occasionally appears fractionally slower, and the raw hunger that characterized his early breakthrough does not always radiate with the same ferocity it once carried. These are not dramatic breakdowns making front-page news, but quiet shifts suggesting something underneath might be quietly unraveling. In elite competition, those quiet shifts are frequently the earliest signals worth taking seriously. The conversation grows even more complicated once you examine the structure built around him. Based on various reports and those close to the situation, Alcaraz's diary has been packed with not only sanctioned tournaments, but exhibition contests, sponsorship obligations, and promotional engagements that push his time and energy to their absolute limits. While these ventures deliver financial gain and worldwide visibility, they simultaneously shrink the space available for proper training, meaningful recovery, and the kind of deliberate preparation that actually sustains careers over the long run.
Cautious optimism that he could recover by the time of the French Open, but a lot of people are saying if Rome is almost impossible, then Roland Garros is more than likely a race against time and probably unlikely as well. Gonna be curious to see what comes out of Carlos's camp over the next couple of days, whether he elects to play Roland Garros or not. It probably won't be a decision that we'll hear about for a week or 2 or 3 maybe. Not playing Madrid, certainly probably not going to be playing Rome, but the French Open's the big one, so we'll...
Becker's unease appears to originate from precisely this imbalance. He recognizes that a tennis career is not constructed within a single season, but across many years of calculated management, unwavering discipline, and personal sacrifice. The risk, from his perspective, is that pursuing short-term rewards can silently erode long-term greatness. It is a viewpoint forged through lived experience, and one that carries genuine authority precisely because it comes from someone who has personally weathered the crushing pressures of early stardom. There was one moment that captured the entire dynamic with remarkable clarity, when Becker reportedly encouraged Alcaraz to consider stepping back and handling his commitments more thoughtfully. The reply he received was courteous, yet telling, as Alcaraz essentially redirected him between placing faith in those around you and preserving authority over your own path. This tension is far from exclusive to Alcaraz, but it becomes considerably sharper when the stakes involved are as enormous as they are in his particular situation.
I was questioning whether he should play Monte Carlo and Barcelona back-to-back. You said correctly there's some appearance money involved and things of that nature that might persuade him to play. But last year he got injured playing Monte Carlo and then playing Barcelona back-to-back. He was pulling out of the Madrid Masters last year. He's done it again this year. This wrist injury doesn't sound too good. I'm slightly concerned that he's sort of pushing it for the French Open a little bit, whether he's going to be fully fit. We don't know yet. There's a lot of speculation. It's a pretty bad wrist injury, but there always is when something like this happens. Not sure Carlos is really scheduling.
At the core of this entire debate sits a fundamental question about what truly matters most. Should a young superstar concentrate on seizing every opportunity available right now, capitalizing on his fame and earning potential while both remain at their highest? Or should the focus stay firmly planted on constructing a career capable of lasting well beyond a single dominant decade? It is far from a straightforward question to answer, particularly in an era where the commercial machinery surrounding professional sports continues growing without restraint. One helpful way to frame the dilemma is as a constant tug-of-war between performance and promotion. On one side sits the necessity to train rigorously, recover properly, and compete at the absolute highest indefinitely, and that even the most naturally gifted competitors require thoughtful management to stay clear of burnout and physical breakdown. Sinner's philosophy, widely regarded as methodical and precisely structured, stands in striking contrast to the increasingly cluttered schedule reportedly surrounding Alcaraz. That contrast powerfully reinforces how consistency and forward-thinking planning remain just as decisive as raw ability in determining who ultimately endures at the very top of modern tennis.
If that was part of the reason why he didn't do so well in Indian Wells and Miami, if this had been carrying along since the beginning of the year, right, and or maybe the past month or so, and it played a part into. I mean, I'll be honest, like when I had a wrist injury, it affected me psychologically. So. I mean, he's human too, so I wonder if that's also part of what was happening there.
Yeah, for sure.
As the season continues unfolding, certain moments on the court have begun mirroring the broader story taking shape off it. Matches that once appeared comfortably within Alcaraz's grasp occasionally slip through his fingers, not necessarily because the skill has abandoned him, but perhaps because accumulated exhaustion and diminished sharpness have quietly crept in. These moments do not define everything he has built, but they steadily contribute to a growing feeling that something meaningful needs addressing, but a fully established force with every ability to actively direct his own journey. Becker's caution, viewed through this lens, reads far more like an invitation to reflect than any form of personal attack. It serves as a powerful reminder that the road to lasting greatness is never purely about reaching the summit, but about finding ways to remain there, and that demands careful foresight, iron discipline, and occasionally uncomfortable decisions. This story is nowhere near its conclusion, and where it leads remains genuinely open. What stands beyond any doubt is that the choices made during this particular chapter will carry consequences that stretch far into the future, defining not only his performances across coming seasons, but ultimately the legacy he leaves the sport. As the spotlight continues burning brightly around him, the delicate balance between ambition and sustainability will remain the defining tension of his narrative. Whether this period is eventually remembered as a turning point or a cautionary tale will depend entirely on how those approaching challenges are met and managed going forward.
Questioning whether he should be playing these exhibitions that you mentioned before, Greg. I spoke to Benoit Paire earlier in the week and he made a similar point. Doesn't think Carlos needs to play these exhibition events. Yannick Sinner is wherever he is this week with his feet up, having a little bit of a practice, getting ready for the Madrid Masters. He's even said he might pull out of that and focus on Rome. So there's a lot going on in Carlos's world and he's injured again. I think it's just a little bit risky. What are your thoughts, Ashley, on whether he's playing too much, and certainly didn't need to play in Barcelona apart from that appearance money, which is...
And that leaves several questions suspended in the air, the kind that offer no quick resolution, yet stubbornly refuse to disappear. Is this simply the unavoidable weight that accompanies standing at the very summit of a sport? Or does it represent an early signal of something considerably more serious, but the boundless future that once appeared entirely within his grasp? Because the deeper you examine this situation, the less it resembles a temporary rough patch. What makes all of this even more captivating is how rapidly stories can reverse direction in tennis. Not so long ago, Carlos Alcaraz was being positioned as the perfect heir to the era defined by Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal, and Novak Djokovic. He was the definitive answer to every conversation asking what the sport looked like beyond its greatest generation. The electricity, the imagination, the utterly fearless shot-making all made it feel completely inevitable that he would carry tennis seamlessly into its next chapter without a single interruption.
I haven't seen him ever as strong as currently. Winning the Sunshine Double and then going back to Europe on clay, winning Monte Carlo and pretty much not losing a set is unbelievable. So he's in top form. And I think, yes, it's possible for him to win in Madrid as well, especially since Alcaraz is out. That's a pity for the tournament, but reminds me of last year where Alcaraz also couldn't play here in Madrid and then went on to win Rome and Paris. So,
Yet what frequently gets lost within those comparisons is the actual foundation that kept those legends standing for so remarkably long. Federer mastered the art of efficiency and deliberately curated his schedule with increasing precision as his career matured. Nadal constructed his dominance upon obsessive dedication and a team structure that placed longevity above everything else, even when that meant making deeply unpopular choices. When a player enters that punishing cycle even marginally underprepared or carrying hidden fatigue, the margin for error vanishes almost without warning. This is the precise moment where discussions around injuries cease being abstract and transform into a genuinely pressing threat. Boris Becker appears to grasp this reality more clearly than most, which is what gave his remarks such unmistakable urgency. He is not responding to a single disappointing performance or one isolated setback, but to an emerging pattern that, if left unaddressed, could quietly develop into something far more destructive. It is exactly the kind of pattern that never announces itself dramatically, but instead gradually chips away at everything a player has built until the eventual decline begins feeling completely unavoidable.
And what John said, he's playing the long game out here. We know that Carlos Alcaraz and also Jannik Sinner, they're chasing basically the greatest of all time in Roger Federer, in Rafa Nadal, and Novak Djokovic. We see the post that he came out with this morning. I woke up to the news, and it is tough. You want to see the defending champions to be able to contend for their title again. You want to see them be able to go up against the best in the world, the 3 out of 5. The biggest show in our sports is the Grand Slam. So it's tough to see world number 1 not be able to defend his title.
Smart decision, though, to do this long term?
I think it's absolutely the smart thing to do.
Meanwhile, the competition is not pausing for any of this to be figured out. Jannik Sinner keeps refining his game with a level of consistency that speaks directly to a thoughtfully managed and disciplined approach. Every tournament presents another opening to narrow the gap, and in a sport where rankings can shift with brutal speed, momentum can change hands far quicker than anyone anticipates. The difference between commanding the sport and chasing it can ultimately come down to a handful of critical decisions made nowhere near the court, and that is precisely what makes this particular moment carry such enormous weight. So the real question has quietly shifted. It is no longer about whether a problem exists, but whether anyone will move decisively enough to confront it before the window closes. Will these warning signals genuinely translate into meaningful change, or will they simply be buried beneath the noise of short-term ambition and commercial convenience? And perhaps above everything else, when the headlines settle and the cameras finally look elsewhere, who truly holds the power to determine what happens next?